Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to today's International Impact webinar series brought to you by NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Welcome to everyone from around the world. I see that you're already popping into the group, and please feel free to let us know in the Q&A, in the chat function, where you're joining us from today. It's always interesting to see how our world comes alive in these webinars. Today, we are very excited to present to you a special event called When Learners Design Their Own Stories, brought to you by two educators from one of our NEASC accredited schools, Stiftung Louisenlund in Northern Germany. Our speakers today will be Damien Vassallo and Petra Hau, and two special student speakers, Julia and Friedrich. We are very excited to share today's webinar with you because this school has done an amazing job of transforming their learning experience for their students. And they have used the ACE learning protocol and the learning principles to help them influence their thinking. And in case you are from a school that is not using ACE learning as their NEASC accreditation protocol, this is one of the accreditation processes that NEASC has, mostly used in our international schools, but not exclusively. And the ACE learning protocol is based on an approach to transforming learning according to what is best for learning for students. And so this particular school has evidenced learning principle 5, which is learner engagement and autonomy, and learning principle 9, which is learning time and space. So you're going to hear today from these experts about how they have transformed their own school through this journey. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Petra, who's going to start us off on today's series, and I'll see you toward the end for our wrap up. Have a great session. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. So, well, our school is in the north of Germany. We are a boarding school and we are about 13 kilometers away from the Danish border. We have currently about 450 students. They are enrolled in the primary school, a secondary school following the German curriculum, and they are enrolled in the IB World School. We are also a member of Round Square and GBG. In Louisenlund, we have many activities to build up community and to give students the chance to develop leadership skills. Sailing is a very important sport at our school, and we also offer many services such as a fire brigade, first responder, and student parliament, to name only a few. During the internal reflection process using the ACE framework, we realized how unsatisfied we were with the gap between how students learn best and how they currently learn at our school. So we decided to transform our approach. But before we give you insights, let's listen to two of our students.
Hello, my name is Friedrich and I am in IB 1 at Louisenlund. And for me, the first thing I'd like to say about the school and the new school system we have is the great flexibility that comes along with it. I am the student body president of our school, and with that comes a lot of different, or sometimes some different meetings and loads of different other responsibilities. And through like the way that we approach school at this here in Louisenlund, I can like plan my day according to my own needs, and it's always very flexible. I have a set structure of seminars and studio times, which Julia will elaborate on later. But technically, like my seminars are my normal classes that I have to attend to. And other than that, I can structure my learning day and my work as I see fit for myself. So for example, I can go into the gym in the middle of the day or have my football practice at some point, just to have a short mental break from all the work. Or from revising for my upcoming exams, for example. And if I have a meeting for a student, for the student body president, then I can just take a free period accordingly, as long as I do not have a seminar class in that time. And obviously, the work I do is still supervised by my teachers when they look at my submissions and the quality of my submissions and my participation in class. But overall, how I structure my day-to-day life is very much up to me. And for me personally, I love this because it provides a good work-life balance, as I can, in a way, structure how I do my work and when I do my work, while also structuring how I go about with my life and my free time and my extracurricular activities. And through this, I learned to be disciplined and work independently, which is, I'd say, especially important when going to university later on or structuring your work and your daily life as an adult. And I mean, me personally, I don't think I require a teacher to tell me what I need to do all the time. Much rather, I'd like to have a mentor, as we have it here, which guides me as I learn to be independent and as I structure my day to reach or fulfill the potential that I have. And yeah, that's basically what I'm most grateful for from the school and what I really appreciate about the school system we have.
Hey, hi, I'm Julia. I'm also an IB year one. And as Friedrich was saying, so studio time is for us maybe one of the most important thing in the IB, because it's basically our room, but it's our workspace. There we work and study and just work with teachers and also like teachers and students. So our weeks are basically a combination of seminars and studio time. It's planned like that for each seminar we work in studio time for 1 hour. And it's basically we go to the room and we need to log into a subject and we work there. It's arranged in a way that we can work alone or with other students. And we always have teachers around sitting in the science corner and the language corner. So we can always go and ask for help or advice or just for a check-in with the teachers. And there's also like a reader corner. And it's for me the best way to get my work done in the best way that works for me. Because if we need to get an essay done, you can decide the way that works better for you to get it done at the time that you need it. And it helps students to find their way of getting their done and decide in what way we want to do it. And it also makes it motivates us to find the best way. And we need to find the initiative to actually get the work done by ourselves. And it helps me be the more responsible because it's up to me to actually get the work done.
So I wanted to now transition and say a special thanks to Trillium for the warm welcome and also to Petra for providing some background information on our school, and a special word of thanks to our 2 student voices. I can't think of a more appropriate way to start a webinar series on student voice than actually hearing student voices themselves from a real learning community. You guys motivate us and inspire us each day in our work. And we thank you for these beautiful introductions, which really capture a lot of the spirit of the transformations that have taken place in our school over the past 3 years. So thank you very much, both of you. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to be able to present today ways for transforming schools to promote student agency and student voice, and to help learners personalize their experience of learning, to make education more accessible for learners, but also to help them to design their own individual story. The transformative process of our learning community taking a leap of faith and moving from thinking about these learning principles to actually living them on a big scale really began with this organization, with NEASC, on 2 levels. The first level was our NEASC CIE accreditation journey, in which we were working with the ACE protocol and with a group of educators and experts who encouraged us as a school community to reflect on and find ways to challenge ourselves to develop things like learner autonomy, a culture of reflection, transforming learning time and space, and integrating new dimensions of learning into our curriculum. The second way in which NEASC really inspired us to begin this transformative journey was the first NEASC conference that Petra and I, as representatives of a new NEASC CIE accredited school, attended in Burlington, Massachusetts in 2019. And that conference was entitled Designed for Learning. And this Design for Learning conference was a real catalyst for transformation and a turning point in development for our school community. We were inspired by many aspects of the Design for Learning conference, but in particular, we were really inspired by Michael Horn's keynote on disruptive innovation and his blended learning model. Michael Horn argued at that conference that to empower students to really experience self-efficacy in education, they need to be able to set their own personal learning goals, and they need to become co-designers of their learning experiences. And that means that they also have to be the ones who develop the action plans and, to a certain extent, make the schedule that allows them, as Friedrich and Julia were both talking about, to pursue those personal learning goals in an effective way through meaningful learning experiences. And Michael Horn also said that, on the next slide, that, that this can only be possible if students have significant control over the time, the place, the path, and the pace of their learning. And that kind of key phrase that he read out in his keynote resonated with us so much that we knew that although we had many plans, learning plans in the works, and had already developed some concepts to transform our learning community, that the time for that transformation of how we understood school and how we lived school had to change. The time was now. So we went home coming back from that conference thinking about how can we change our schools from the bricks and mortar school of the past to schools that are schools designed for the future, to meet the future needs of students and also to meet their needs in the present. When we talk about the school of the past and the school of the future, and these might be a bit provocative categories, but allow me to present through this kind of lens of contrast what we mean by this. We understand the school of the past, and this may be familiar to many of you educators, as a school that primarily approaches education through direct instruction. So teachers impart knowledge to students as experts through lectures, for example. Students are largely passive recipients of that knowledge. They're focused on the acquisition of content and, to a certain extent, the reproduction of that content. There's little differentiation in the school of the past, which gives consideration to students' backgrounds, to their interests, to their personal learning preferences. And learning experiences are largely determined by the teacher, and it's a kind of one-size-fits-all program. Then at the end of units or learning sequences, teachers assess that knowledge acquisition through traditional assessments such as examinations. That school, as a lot of us knew it, may be overstated, but I think that will resonate with a lot of people as the school of the 20th century and perhaps even the 19th century. The school of the future that we imagined actually several years before throughout this process of the NEASC accreditation, and certainly in that moment at the conference, was a school that promotes active learning where learners are not passive recipients of knowledge, but they actively construct their own understanding of the world. And then with those understandings, they apply that knowledge actively to different contexts by doing things. And in doing things, in learning by doing, they develop skills and competencies, including the 21st century skills that are always talked about. And these 21st century skills lead them then to deeper learning or conceptual understanding. For example, through critical and creative thinking or through collaborative problem solving. Students move beyond merely the mastery of content or the acquisition of knowledge to real understanding of the concepts or the bigger ideas that frame that knowledge, and they're able to apply those concepts to other contexts within their subject and also across disciplines. We also imagine the school of the future as being a place where learners had the opportunity to personalize their learning by setting their own goals. So giving students a voice and giving students meaningful choices as co-designers of curriculum with us, and then allowing them to engage in meaningful assessment beyond just traditional examinations that reflects their experience in the real world and also prepares them for future experiences. Now, before I move on and with Petra together share some of the results of our brainstorming and some of the principles we came up for how the school of the future could look like in our context, I'd like to ask each of you to take the time to get active and be active participants and generate your own understandings. Thinking about the question, to what extent does your learning community reflect the school of the past, those qualities that I just mentioned? And to what extent does your learning community embody the school of the future? And I realize that all schools are on a journey, and there's probably no school here that's completely a school of the past and a school of the future. So we speak to you as colleagues, and we want to have your input on ways in which your school is working on transforming or transitioning from a school of the past to the school of the future. So while we go forward in the presentation, if you could share maybe one aspect of how your school might still be a school of the past that might be frustrating to you and that you might want to move beyond, and one aspect in which way your school might embody the school of the future that I described, please feel free to do so, and we'll be happy to see those ideas come in for all the participants to look at. Thank you. So the results of our brainstorming were that we came up with some key principles that undergird or that are the foundation for our school's transformation and for our school's activity going forward. And first and foremost is the idea that each individual learner is important and that they are the principal actor in their learning process. This means that if the learner themselves are really the principal actor, then they have to have a say or a voice in what learning goals or learning outcomes they want to reach. So to a certain extent, their learning goals have to be personalized, and their learning program to achieve those goals, including the strategy and their own timetable, also has to be personalized. Now, focusing on the individual learner and allowing them to personalize their learning means also developing good self-management skills. We have to promote self-regulation and help and support these learners to work independently, effectively. We also wanted to be a school offering so many co-curricular experiences as we do that integrates this richness of these other experiences that go beyond the cognitive realm into the psychomotor or the affective dimensions of learning, to get those to be really a fundamental part of our educational concept and to integrate them into the school day. So having co-curricular experiences in IB language CAS or service as action in the MYP as a fundamental part of our school day. Now, knowing that students were going to take this much responsibility for their learning and have this much voice, we know that support systems that are strong are essential. And so, for example, having students have a mentor with whom they can reflect on a regular basis to support that learning, offering additional coaching to promote this kind of student agency and to act as a safeguard to ensure that students are still fulfilling program requirements like the requirements of the IB diploma program, for example. We also, in a German school context, Germany's schools focus on competencies rather than just focusing on content. And so we wanted to take that aspect of our German educational heritage and say, let's focus on approaches to learning skills. Let's focus on sensory skills. Let's really hone in on learning by doing, which I alluded to before. A further principle is that we're living in a digital age and we're noticing that our students cannot disconnect themselves from their digital devices like their cell phones and their tablets. And so we thought, how can we get them to focus on using this digital media constructively to support their learning rather than to simply distract them from their learning? We also wanted them to move to deeper learning, to this conceptual understanding that I talked about before, and took the model of inquiry-based learning as the best framework for doing so, which is rooted and anchored in the IB programs, and specifically a focus of the middle years program. And then knowing that students have to approach their learning strategically as relatively autonomous learners, we wanted to work on their metacognitive skills. How can they get into a mindset where they reflect regularly, where they take a step back, a bird's eye perspective, so to speak, and look at their own learning and their own learning processes and work to optimize them. And one such way is that they work with a portfolio from the time that they start at Louisenlund, matriculate here as students, to the time that they graduate or leave our learning community, that they document their learning journey and their progress in the form of a portfolio that acts as a reflection instrument and helps them approach their learning strategically. Can also serve as the basis for a mastery certificate, which we issue to them in the form of a Louisenlund report at the end of their time here. And it's just a really nice way for them to document the story that they're telling through their lives here in our learning community.
Yeah, so Damien mentioned that already. When we came back from the NEASC 2019 conference, we are so motivated, and we really felt that we are ready to transform our community into a student-centered learning community, basically. So we organized a one-day workshop for all our IB students we had at that time to hear from them how, where, and when they want to learn. The only condition was redesign our IB learning spaces using the Stanford design cycle model. So first of all, they stated the problems we had currently. Well, we had kind of an experiential learning space, but the students felt demotivated, the colors were missing, and they said that there is no room for personalized learning. And as you can see here on the pictures, sometimes it was just messy because we didn't have a clear concept. Then they stated the aims, and basically they all wanted to have comfortable learning zones to meet the needs of all learners. They then designed floor plans. They were free to use any digital tool they wanted to use. And you already can see from that floor plan that they wanted to divide the space up into different areas. Here you see that as well from another group. This group focused on a big lounge area. And this group even used Minecraft to prototype a learning space. We were actually very surprised how important the colors were to the students. And all groups wanted us to use a color scheme inspired by the colors you see in nature around us. So they wanted to have a zone for individual learning. They also wanted to have a zone for collaboration. They wanted to even have an outside study area when the weather is nice. And they wanted to have a lounge area to hang out with friends during short breaks. And there was also a competitive element in the workshop. At the end of the workshop, they had to pitch their ideas to the senior management. And here you see the winning teams. So after the student workshop, we took all the ideas from the students and redesigned our learning space. And this is our floor plan. And you see that we here created an area for individual study. We have group tables for collaboration. We have a reading corner. We have a lounge area, etc. And, you know, the space was already there. And before we used this as our experiential learning space, it was a room where we stored the boats. And the tables, the desks, and the chairs, they were already available. And so Damien and I went shopping, and we bought some couches and armchairs to add a few cozy elements. And this is actually that has been our learning studio now for almost 3 years.
So thank you, Petra. I still remember how exciting that day was when the students had that design challenge and when we were inspired by their ideas. And ultimately, the great product or the final vision in this phase of our school's community's life together is our new Learning and Research Center, which actually opened last week on Monday, and we were able to move in which we actually already have 3 learning studios completed. A 4th will be added, and there's a separate learning studio for the junior school on a different part of campus. So here you see an example of this flexible open learning space, which offers group tables for collaboration or for partner work, which offers a more quiet area that can be sealed off by these acoustic curtains that we have for independent study or totally self-directed learning. We have research areas, research nooks that will be outfitted with computers. So students who don't want to work on their tablets, but would like to work on a bigger screen when designing a product or designing a presentation can work there. And the students, when they have studio time, can move freely about this space. Teachers are there from various subject groups to support them. And here you have a look at the IB's learning studio. We have other branches of our school that have separate learning studios as well. This is not the only space in which we learn. We also have seminar rooms, which are more classic learning spaces as well. And here you can see a visualization of the outside of the building. We could have taken a photograph, but the weather in January, is quite gray. So we thought we'd use the visualization, which has some greenery around it. And we'll send pictures to NEASC after it's complete. And hopefully someone from NEASC will have a chance to come visit us as well. Here's an example of the Lazy Lab in the Learning Studio of the junior school, where students have the opportunity to read or to reflect or to think or to have casual conversation. It's really kind of a brainstorming chill area that's supposed to combine relaxation with cognition. Okay, now Petra has talked about one element or half of Learning Principle 9, how we transformed our learning spaces. But Louisenlund also transformed its learning time structure to promote the personalization of learning and to give students more autonomy. And both of our student voices who are here today have alluded to this. In our learning community, about half of the school day consists of what we call seminars and half consists of what we call studio time. Now, seminars are basically what we know to be classes or lessons. They take place in a fixed learning group or course with a subject teacher that is responsible for that course. They are student-centered and mostly take the form of cooperative learning experiences or simulations, but they're managed by the teacher who sets the pace, the approach, and the learning outcomes for each of those seminars. And they take place in what we call seminar rooms predominantly, which are essentially classes. Studio time, by contrast, is the home of self-directed learning. And it was inspired by the Design for Learning conference and by Michael Horn's blended learning model, hence the name Studio Time, which comes from a design studio and these design studio-like spaces and approaches where the students are in control of their learning. Studio time and the way students allocate it varies from week to week. So they have fixed blocks of studio time in their schedule, but they are not aligned with any particular subject or experience. Rather, students have the opportunity to determine based on their own learning goals and based on their learning needs at a given phase in their learning, what subject they work on and how they approach it in the learning studio. And studio time takes place to a large extent in these open learning spaces that we've been showing you, but can also take place in the art studio or in the laboratories. Now, a further transformation of our learning time structure involves the learning phases within a given unit or learning sequence. And these are directly related to that dichotomy or interplay between seminars and studio time. So you see that we start with a seminar, and in the seminar, students will get an introduction to the unit. The teacher will talk about the concepts of the unit, the overall topics and the text that we're going to cover. They'll walk the students through the inquiry questions, the objectives, and the desired learning outcomes. They'll provide some transparency for how students' learning will be assessed, what assessment components there will be, and what criteria these components will be assessed on. And they might even provide some direct instruction at the beginning of the unit to get students going in a particular conceptual or content area. Then our students move into the knowledge acquisition phase in studio time, in which content delivery takes place in this blended learning model digitally or asynchronously. So students will watch videos or work with infographics or texts in which they acquire basic knowledge, and maybe they'll do some practice exercises to acquire some and practice some basic skills in that particular area, so that when they come to class, when they come to the seminar, that they already have some knowledge in the area and we can really dive deeper and promote that deeper kind of learning. But in order to add a layer of accountability and to check that students are actually using the studio time wisely, we'll have some form of mastery test or mastery assessment prior to the seminar, usually each week. That could take the form of a multiple choice test that's taken digitally on a software like Assess Prep. That could take the form of students simply uploading their notes on a given text, or maybe a concept map that they've developed after they've worked with an infographic or with a video. And then the teacher will see this student work in advance and be able to gauge their level and plan some differentiation if need be. Then the teacher, knowing where the students are, has a better ability to facilitate the seminars where students come in and they deepen their understanding and develop their conceptual knowledge as well as their competencies in cooperative learning experiences. We then release them back into the studio where they enter a transfer phase where they apply that knowledge, develop their own products, work on assessments, perhaps the summative assessment that comes at the end of the unit, which could take the form of a formal examination, but could also be some sort of performance-based or authentic assessment. And this cycle repeats itself multiple times throughout a unit or a learning sequence until we arrive at the summative assessment. And then it starts again in the next unit. The next slide is just another way to visualize this. So emphasizing the fact that content delivery takes place digitally and asynchronously in studio time, and that students are responsible for that knowledge acquisition phase. We provide them with lots of materials, of course. Then coming into the seminar to deepen their understanding in this co-construction of knowledge phase through cooperative learning experiences, and then back into the studio for the transfer and application phase in which they can get really creative and really become designers. Here are just some pictures from studio time in the early phases before our design challenge, when the room had not been set up exactly how we wanted to have it, but you can see students collaborating informally. Remember, in studio time, they are in charge of the learning experience. So the teacher is there to act as a support, both in their subject area and in terms of reflexive learning. So helping students think about their strategies and their approaches, in addition to offering subject-specific support. The next slide shows how students in the new learning studio have smaller breakout rooms. And so they can organize study groups or breakout sessions of their own. As we see on the picture on the left that I took last week, I had this real moment where I saw this in action and thought, this is great. The students from a biology course coming together and working together in order to deepen their learning, or students on the right side at the bottom preparing for their seminar through this asynchronous phase of knowledge acquisition or content delivery, and students practicing their skills on the now writable walls that we have in our learning studio.
Damien, could I stop you for just a second and ask you to just give some context to which grade levels your school, where this work is being done? Because some of our questions in the Q&A are about primary school, middle years program. Which programs do you have, and which students are doing this kind of studio time?
That's right. So to varying levels or I should say, with varying levels of student agency, the entire school has a kind of studio time. So we do have a primary school, and the primary school is not within the IB primary years program. It's part of the German state curriculum for the local province, but they also use a kind of learning studio model. Obviously, there's more staff support, but there's certainly the ability to differentiate and personalize. We also have a middle years program, both the national curriculum and the IB middle years program, in which this is taking place. And we have an upper secondary school in the German curriculum, and also an IB diploma program. So I think the short answer is that we're doing it across the board, which is quite amazing. And actually, in many ways, it was the IB and the primary school that were really the inspiration for the rest of the school to see that this could be done at in different grade levels at different ages. And as I said, to promote conceptual understanding and to promote deeper learning, pretty much all of our learning sequences and most of our learning experiences are anchored in inquiry-based learning, that students start with good questions, often provided by the teacher themselves or provided in some cases by the IB, but also questions that students co-design or co-draft together with teachers, for example, in the extended essay and in other learning experiences, as the starting point for learning, and then pursuing answers to these questions through action, learning by doing, research, experimentation, simulation, or even just practicing skills through exercises. Then moving into a reflection phase on two levels: the cognitive, where they abstract these big ideas and arrive, hopefully, at conceptual understanding and deeper learning, and also the metacognitive level, where they take a step back and reflect on their learning processes and look, what processes went well, what strategies worked for me, what approaches will I continue to use in the future, in which context, what didn't go so well, and what do I need to adjust. And then hopefully from this phase of reflection, new questions are born, and the teachers will certainly encourage that, so that the cycle continues to repeat itself and continues to fuel or to drive student learning.
Julia and Friedrich mentioned that at the beginning. In our student-centered learning community, our students have a lot of freedom, but they also have a lot of responsibility. And so every student has a mentor who supports them and their learning. We meet every Monday morning during mentor check-in, and the students plan their week. They discuss the plan with their mentors, or the tasks they have to do, they want to complete in that week, and the mentors give them advices. And the students also address challenges or achievements, and they reflect on their learning. And to design their own story and document the personalized learning, our students maintain a portfolio. It not only represents snapshots of their learning like traditional pieces of assessment, but the whole process of learning. Pieces that go into the portfolio are, for example, reflections or journals or exhibitions. At the end of their time in Louisenlund, they have an exit meeting and we issue a certificate. So the portfolio helps students to develop self-management skills and reflection skills. And it's also a great tool to celebrate achievements. And of course, it documents the unique story of a learner.
Sorry. Now we want you as our colleagues worldwide in the network of NEASC schools to help us continue to design the school of the future, and to help also transform your own learning communities. So as we move into the Q&A phase of this webinar, we wanted you to brainstorm individually or together with the people that you're sitting with in your various contexts throughout the world, and choose one of the following areas that we spoke to today to either look at innovative learning spaces, to look at disruptive innovation for a learning time structure that could be different in your school context, for for transforming instructional design to make learning experiences more flexible, more authentic, and more meaningful, and to develop ways for students to demonstrate their learning that tailor to a variety of student interests and student needs and student skills and talents. So developing ideas for authentic assessment. And you can share these ideas throughout the Q&A period in the chat, and hopefully the participants can be inspired about the ways that you are transforming your learning communities or hope and plan to do so. Oh, and with that, I'll hand the floor back to Trillium. Thank you so much.
Great. So it's interesting to see. I really love to see all of the communication back and forth in the chat. So I give people a moment to answer your question. And maybe while they're doing that, Damien and Petra, there are a few kind of specific questions in the Q&A that I think everyone would like to hear. So I'm going to ask you a couple of direct questions that won't take long to answer to make sure that everyone understands all of your context. So one of the questions that is coming up is about the mentor model and how many students meet with each or have each, what the ratio is for students and mentors, and how long the mentor meetings take, how long they are each week or each occurrence.
Good question. Petra's a mentor, so I think you can take that.
So usually one mentor has about 8 students. And we meet every Monday morning, as I said, and a mentor meeting is 1 hour or 90 minutes long. And if there are more issues to discuss or the students wanted to talk with us during the week, of course, they always can do that. So we are not limited to this 1 hour or 90 minutes on a Monday morning.
Great. And would that mentor be the person that would capture maybe any concerns that might be happening with the students' learning or personal lives, and tracking that for the rest of the school community in terms of the professionals to understand?
Yeah, that's right. So the mentor helps or supports the students in the academic performance. Well, we are a boarding school, so we have also house parents who take care of the students. But we communicate, of course. As a mentor, I communicate with the house parents, I communicate with the parents, etc. So we are always try to be on the same page.
Okay, great.
Yes, and the mentor is actually involved also in the students' design of their learning program, including co-curricular experiences. They're really the first contact and the first person who's responsible to make sure that a student exercising all of this autonomy fulfills their program requirements, including their hours for the IB diploma program, by the way.
Yeah, I sense that probably IB educators that are in our audience today are wondering, how do you fulfill all of the requirements? How do you make sure they're ready for exams? How much studio time do they have in a week? Those types of questions, the how would you ever make this work in your own school? Can you kind of speak to some of those challenges that you've overcome?
Well, I think the general ratio of seminars to studio time is 1-to-1. And we've had some great conversations with people at the IB about how we're approaching learning. So when students say we have to have this many hours of in a particular subject, we're in dialogue with the former Director General of the IB about how we could integrate this into studio time. So having teachers present on that floor that work with students in a different way, where students are driving those learning experiences, but they're supported by those teachers. Students can also fulfill their hours for the IB in that way, which is unconventional, and we weren't certain if we could go forward with it. But the general ratio is 1-to-1. The ratio is a little bit higher toward this on the seminar end in the middle years program. So we kind of increase the level of agency and self-regulation that students have as they move into the upper grades.
Great.
And
Go
our
ahead,
students
Petra.
see the available studio times in their timetable, basically, and then they can log into studio times, and so they have to decide which subject they are going to work on, and this is how we, in the end, can see how many studio times they had how many studio times they had have done English or humanities, etc. So that's easy for us to calculate then in the total.
Okay, great. Maybe we could invite Julia and Frederick to join us back on screen if they could, because it'd be interesting to hear their perspective on a typical day. Julia and Frederick, if you're still there, could you put your cameras back on? Great. Thanks. Julia, we were wondering, could you just kind of describe for us maybe, you know, what's your day like? What's your day like today? What does your schedule look like? And how have you adapted it to what you need today?
For example, today, Monday, in the morning, we have the IB assembly where they say important information for the whole week. And then we have the mentor check-in. And my mentor is Ms. House. So I meet with her. I talk about, for example, next week, we have exam week. So how am I planning on getting everything done and learning everything I need to? And if I have asked the teachers for past papers or how I want to learn for the exam week. And then today, for example, I only have one seminar. And then I just log in for the studio time for the whole day in what I want to work. But today, for example, I decided that, okay, because of this webinar, but I was only going to be there until 3 instead of until 6, because today I said, like, I don't want to work the whole day in studio time. So I decided that I wanted to take 2 free periods, and tomorrow I'm going to recover those.
Well, that's a lot of responsibility for you to plan that out, but such good experience. Frederick, could I ask you, do you think so I won't ask about you personally, but do you think any of your friends or other students that you know, do they stay on track with this kind of scheduling and this freedom, or do sometimes people get off track, would you say?
No, I definitely say that for the majority, all of us do stay on track because we do have the regular mentor check-ins every Monday. And basically, if you don't meet your requirements, your mentor will tell you that you have to work on being more disciplined or finishing your work or catching up in specific classes or participating more in class. So if someone falls behind, they'd fall behind for the maximum of, let's say, 5 days, 1 week, until basically the mentor would then talk to them and guide them to basically get back on track. And yeah, so basically I'd say none of us ever really fall behind because we always end up having that conversation with our mentor who reassures us, or basically assures also for our teachers, that our work gets done and that we do the work that we have to do.
I recall from visiting your school a few years ago that you have quite a few systems and structures in place for student voice and leadership in the school. Could you guys talk a little bit about your roles as student leaders and, you know, how students get to participate not only in the day, but in building the school of the future that you're aiming toward?
I get that question. I am this year we have a student parliament in our school. Then we have class representatives, which make up that student parliament, and house representatives from all the boarding school houses. And then we have a student executive team, which it consists of 6 students. And this year I am also the student body president of the executive team. So basically, the school takes us in on a lot of matters that comes to what the school has planned for the next few years, what the school has planned with a new building. For example, 2 weeks before the building was actually finished, we had a tour with our principals as the student body, and they talked to us about the new rules in the building, how they'd expect us to work here. And they also asked us to get some feedback from the students for some stuff that we might want to add, for example, like when it comes to furniture or that type of stuff. Also, other than that, when it comes to general rules or regulations in the school, we always have a say, and we can always, in a way, like appeal to certain decisions from the school. And then there's always like an open talk to either to the headmaster or to one of the principals. And yeah.
That's great. Julia, do you want to add anything else to that, or did he speak to that well enough?
I think he covered all.
Yeah, he did a good job. Thanks. Damien and Petra, I'd like to ask you, do you think that this type of flexible, forward-thinking education model can work in a non-boarding school? Do you feel that the extra time you have with students 24/7 made this possible, or do you think this is possible in a traditional school with a traditional school day?
Well, I think in a boarding school it is easier, but I am very convinced that you can do this in any school. We realize that you have to have the mindset to do it, to make the change happen. And actually you can do this in any classroom. Just rearrange your classroom, rearrange the space, the time. So, and we, as I told at the beginning, we had already this space. So we added a few elements, and we had a new system to have a very flexible approach. And so it works. I think it works in any context.
And you didn't spend a lot of money on your redesign
No.
and your refurnishing, correct? I remember hearing that. Could you talk a little bit about how you did this on a budget?
Yeah, well, I don't want to advertise the company, but we went to a store where you can buy your furniture right away. And we only spent a few €1,000 for this big space. We bought all the couches, the armchairs, little desks, etc. So we added only a few elements. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on in order to redesign your space. The mindset is more important. That the leadership is behind it, that the teachers, your team are behind it, and then it's going to work.
And I'll add to that. I think Petra covered almost all of it. But that space that we created with very little money, of course, we feel super privileged now to be in this new learning and research center with these beautiful rooms and beautiful learning studios. But the difference in the quality of learning, it's not all that significant. So it's certainly motivating and inspiring to have the new space, and it's quite necessary for the broader community because we didn't have enough of these flexible open learning spaces to accommodate other branches of the school. But for the IB, we could have continued for another decade in this original learning space and had just as effective and inspiring experiences of learning as we do in our new space. So really, we would encourage schools that are on a tighter budget to co-opt your students as co-designers of these spaces, get everybody on board, and make a project out of it.
Yeah, great. And how did you get your teaching staff and your other staff on board with this idea of truly transforming the way you were providing education? There were people that had been teaching in other styles, right, before this all occurred. So how do you transform from a traditional role of the teacher to a mentor and coach role?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, to transform teachers' mindsets, you've got to collaborate. So we work together, and I have to tell you, the accreditation process with NEASC gave us an excuse to actually amp up that collaborative planning and reflection time. So I would say reflection together as a team on a regular basis that's very deliberate and intentional, and collaboration in the instructional design and curriculum development is also very, very necessary to create that mindset and to get everyone on board, because teachers feel like they're then real stakeholders who are invested in the transformation that's taking place, and that it's not simply a top-down decision. And then from a more traditional management perspective, it's a lot of messaging. So it's talking about these things that I talked about over and over again with students, with staff members, with parents, until you really get them on board and they internalize this message of how school can look differently and how school can more reflect the world outside. And our parents particularly resonate with this because they see how detached, they see this disconnect between the reality of school as they experienced it and as most of their other children experienced it. And they want school to change. They want school to be more like the workplace or the academy or research centers, so that what students are doing are preparing themselves for the rest of their lives as well as engaging in learning. So getting away from this not really authentic context, but it's about a lot of messaging, a lot of dialogue, and a lot of joint reflection and collaboration.
That's great. I really want to come and learn in your space, and I want to be a student in your school for sure. Someone had asked in the chat, we have recorded this session and we are going to be sending this out in case you want to share it with other people in your network who might be interested in today's conversation. We have about 3 more minutes. I just want to give our all of our panelists a chance to give one last word. What's one thing that you would like schools out there to know from your own experience? What's one last thought? Petra, you've got it.
Yeah, just do it. Try it out. You know, you have to be a risk taker. Basically, you don't know what the result will be. But we decided, we as adults, we are also lifelong learners. So try it, try new things, and it's going. It will make it happen. And I have to say, I don't want to go back to an old traditional schooling system. I really enjoy being a teacher even more in that new flexible system.
I would echo what Petra said, and I would say, believe in your students. As Kurt Hahn famously said, there's more in them than you think. They are capable of taking ownership for their learning, even students that you might classically identify as weaker students, and make them your partners in the transformation process. So get them on board from the start, listen to their ideas, integrate their ideas, allow them to see their ideas come to fruition. And then you'll see that you can really transform your learning community in a way that you might not have imagined before.
Frederick or Julia, any last words of advice for other schools?
I mean, from a student perspective, I can just say that, like as a student, you feel a lot more appreciated when a teacher can talk on the same level with you. You don't want anybody talking down on you or talking at you. You don't want anybody to tell you what you have to do, what you should do. But much rather you want to feel heard. So I feel like a big thing that comes along with the school system is actually appreciating the students and making sure that the students are just as on board as everybody else.
Great, Julia, you get the last word today.
Yeah, and just to add, for me, it makes, I think it makes students motivated to get the work done, more like a part of a daily basis task, instead of something you need to do as a boring homework. It motivates you to actually get your work done in the best way.
Excellent. Well, thank you to all of our panelists and experts here. I know I can speak for myself and say we're really inspired and impressed by the work that you've done in just less than 5 short years, from what I can tell, and seeing the transformation myself, having been to your school at the beginning of this and seeing cardboard cutouts of desks of where you might move them around to try things out, to to hearing the impact on your students is really, really impressive. Thank you, Damien, Petra, Friedrich, and Julia, for a great session today. It's been fantastic meeting you all.